Kuovonne here with a video on how you can convert a linked record field into a junction record. So right now I have two tables. There is the parent table that shows the parent records, and then a child table that shows the child linked records, and I can link them directly. But what I want is I want to have a little bit more about that relationship where I have a junction record that joins them too. But just the way I have it set up is I want to be able to write from the parent, choose that one that's going to be a direct child, and say I want it to be 1, and then have that junction record created for me. And so I have an automation that will do this. So we can see here, I set it up here that it was 1, but now it's actually created there, and now I have this junction record that shows that relationship. And then after it's cleared up, I can go in and I can say, hey, I've got another one. And here, I have these records here. And then when the automation runs, you can see that it clears out that direct child relationship, and then it creates these junction records and clears out the initial one. So the way this is set up is when you're only going to be adding one child at a time through here. So allow linking to multiple records is turned off, so you can only select one at a time. And my junction table, you can see here, has a link to the parent and a link to the child. And I have the direct link to the child is what's going to trigger it. So when there's a record in the parent table where the direct child is not empty, we're going to run this automation, and it's going to do two things. First is it's going to create the junction record, and you need to fill out the two link record fields for it. So one is the parent link. It's just going to be the record ID from that triggering record, which is the parent record. And then the child link is going to be the record ID from the linked child field. So let me show you that one because that's a little bit trickier to see. What it is we're going to go into that step 1 record, and we're going to look at direct child. And then on this, make a new list of based on those IDs. Okay, so this gets that record ID of the child. So that's going to create the record. And then we want to go back and we want to clear out that direct child link so it's reset and ready for us to add another one. So that's our second action here, which is the update record. It's very simple. In the parent table with a record ID of the triggering record, take that direct child and let's blank that out and make it empty. And there you have it. I can create new junction records simply by selecting what child I want to be joined in the parent record. Okay, so this works really well when there are only one record picked at a time. But what if you have a situation when you have a form and you want to have the form where you can pick several different children all at once, and you want junction records to be created for that? So here's a different base where you can create junction children from multiple direct children. So here I've got my parents table and my child table and my junction table here. So this is a little bit more complicated to set up. Let's say I've got my form and I'm me, and I want to add 1, 2, and 3 as my direct children, and I submit that. You can see here that is set up in here, and that's the one form, the one record created by the form, but now I want to turn that into junction records so that I have 3 junction records, and I've got an automation that will do that, and it requires a few helper fields. This could also be done in a script, which is kind of nice because with the script you can do it all in one automation run, but sometimes you're just not ready to write the code, and so you want to have a no-code method of doing it. So let's take a look at how this works. Let's see if we can show it a little more. Yeah, so you can see here now we have those 3 junction records, And if we look at here, there's me and 1, 2, 3, those children records. And of course, normally you would have some other fields here that talk more about that relationship. Okay. So the way this works is when we have these records filled in with the direct children, let me go ahead and just do this for one here so that you can kind of see how things work. And the automation is not going to run because the trigger for our automation that starts it is with the form submission. So you can see when I have multiple records with the direct children here, I've got a roll-up of the direct children record IDs. So these are the record IDs of all of the children. If you look in my child record, you can see I've just got a formula field that just says, what's the record ID? And here it is. And then when the form is submitted, it'll have those direct children fields, and the roll-up will show what are those linked record IDs. Then what the automation does, it's going to copy this roll-up into a single line text field that is the current children record IDs. And then I have two formula fields, one that picks out the very first direct child record ID, and then shows all the rest of the remaining. And this is the second automation that we have. And then it's going to create one link record for that. And then it's going to copy these records over and over again until they're all done and all of the records are created. So let's take a look at that automation. The first automation is to create the junction from the children record. So this is when the trigger is when a form is submitted. And it's going to update that triggering record. And all it does is it copies the direct children record IDs from the roll-up into that single line text field, to the text field. That's all it does. The bulk of the work is actually done in part 2, which is a second automation. And here, that is when a record is updated in the first direct child record ID, it's going to trigger. And let's take a look here. If we look back at that, the first direct child ID is going to be a formula field that says from that single line text of the current children record IDs, let's just extract that first record ID. And then the remaining children record IDs are going to be all the other record IDs there except that first one. So when we first had it, there were 3 record IDs here. We pasted into here. And then the formula picked out the first one. And then this formula picked out the remaining 2. Okay. So that's when it runs. And then this is watching that first one. And it says, hey, if this first direct child record ID is not empty, let's go create a junction record for it. So here's the create record action. It's going to take the record ID of the parent and then the record ID from that first direct child record ID field and create the junction record for that. And then in the parent record, it's going to move that remaining child record IDs into the current children record ID single line text field. So it'll take those 2 remaining ones, move it into the single line text field, which is going to recalculate those formulas, which moves everything down, and it just keeps on doing it until there are no more junction records to be created, in which case that first direct child record ID is going to be empty. And when that is, we're going to say, hey, we've created all of our child record ID junction records. So let's go ahead and take now that direct children link and we'll blank it out. That's how it works. It's a little bit complicated, but it does work quite well when you have to create junction records from direct children links, and they are submitted by a form.